This morning, I'm going to give you a historical outline or a view of our history. In the front of your bulletin or your souvenir book, you will find the entire history of St. Paul African Methodist Episcopal Church. This morning, I'm going to attempt to highlight some of the things that happened in the past that has brought us where we are today. If you will reflect back with me for a few minutes and sort of imagine a group of people, small in number, in 1914, gathering around to pray and have service among themselves because they wanted to worship God as they wanted to worship Him. They didn't want to worship as Episcopalians. They had something that they wanted to say and a way that they wanted to talk to our God. And so they decided to meet and gather together in a small family home of Edward and Rebecca Johnson. They met at 12 noon, I'm told, from one of the oldest members of this church, deceased about 2 years ago, that every day at noon that they would have to pray. Rebecca happened to have been blind, but she knew at noon that they would pray. And they prayed and they prayed. And so therefore on the 14th of December in the year of on the 1st of December in the year of 1914, along with 5 men who were to become the first trustees, they executed the first deed for property located at 4th Avenue and 19th Street. That is 4th Court and 19th Street. They were then in a dilemma as to what should be the name of our church. And of course, God bless Mrs. Johnson. She came forth, a Bible reading lady, and said, why not name the church Paul after St. Paul or after the Apostle Paul in the Bible? So that's where we got our name, St. Paul, from Mrs. Rebecca Johnson's suggestion for a name. The first pastor of St. Paul was the Reverend G.A. Robbie, serving from 1915 to 1925. In 1925, from 1925 to 1958, there were 15 ministers. I will not name all 15, but I'm sure that you can reflect on some of these that I will be naming for you that have pastored this great church. The Reverend B. Blacknell Sr., the Reverend A.P. Postel, the Reverend J.P. B. Epperson, the Reverend George A. Savage, the Reverend F.E. Sneed, and the Reverend L.D. Kennedy. In 1961, the property at 4th Court and 19th Street was purchased for urban renewal. Prior to that, I think I gave you up in 1958, and in 1958, the bishop appointed as the minister of St. Paul, the Reverend M.J. Faison, who faced the dilemma of urban renewal coming in and taking the property that had been ours at that time. When this was done, it was decided that they would look for a new site, and they saw things were moving away from Overtown, so they decided that they wanted to look further. And that's how they got to Liberty City. And there was this church here in Liberty City that was known to be, it was named Lakeview, and it was sort of up for sale. Under the direction of the Reverend M.J. Faison, they negotiated purchase this property. Sadly to say that before the completion of the negotiations and everything, that the Reverend M.J. Faison passed and went to be with our Lord. But the bishop saw fit in May of 1962 to appoint the Reverend T.C. Kelly to be pastor. In July 1962, the Reverend Faison passed. And then the Reverend T.C. Kelly was sent to be our pastor. Under his dynamic leadership, this edifice was built. He was the foreman, the contractor, and the carpenter. He did it all. In 1977, Reverend Kelly had completed his mission, and therefore we received a new minister, the Reverend S.L. Gay. Under his dynamic leadership, we purchased a parking lot on 51st Terrace. We built a new parsonage, which was dedicated on March 3rd, 1985, with the Honorable Bishop Philip R. Cousin presiding. He established a building committee to research ideas and make recommendations for remodeling and the renovation of our church. In November of 1988, Reverend Gay received a challenge to move to another church, and therefore we were blessed to have a dynamic young man join us as our minister in the presence of the Reverend Vincent Floyd Mitchell. Reverend Mitchell came in running. He decided that we must complete our renovations of our church. All of our ministers prior to Reverend Mitchell and at the time of Reverend Mitchell's coming to us had made up in their mind that this was going to be a great church to serve our God. He decided that we must start immediately. So therefore, in January 1990, the renovations of the sanctuary began. And as Reverend Mitchell would say, we must complete it immediately. In August of 1990, we completed our sanctuary. We were proud to have new pews, pulpit chairs, stained glass windows, a new sound system, modern restrooms, and a new front entrance. And gladly was proud to host the 100th session of the South Florida Annual Conference. 1994, we remodeled the old parsonage and made it a learning center. And then Reverend Mitchell decided that he needed to have a better place to meet with the members of the church. So we went about and got ready to remodel the office area. And now I'm sure that when you go to have a conference with the pastor, that you can find that you have a conference room where you can sit in privacy with the pastor and have your conference. Also, we renovated then the office areas for the secretary and gave Reverend Mitchell his own private office. At this present time, we have completed our plans. They have been submitted to the zoning board for our new renovations on our fellowship hall. Our fellowship hall is the project that we have in mind now, not to be the end of our renovation in our building and our working for God in our community, but we are ready to push off and get started, and hopefully in January 1998 we will be breaking ground for our new fellowship hall. Yes, the heritage of St. Paul is rich. A legacy of greatness is ours to enjoy. God has indeed set before us an open door and showered us with strong leadership. Thank you.